Hi, in this video we're going to dive in a little bit deeper into the Discover Permissions report from the perspective of a site owner. So we refer to this as a contextual report because we're inside the site or inside the list or the library where we wish to actually manage the permissions and report on the permissions. And one of those reports, which is probably going to be the key report, is the Discover Permissions. And we're going to have a look at the standard Discover Permissions report and also the advanced Discover Permissions report inside this video. So first of all, what you'll notice in the top right hand corner is the DeliverPoint menu, and from there we can run the Discover Permissions report straight away on the SharePoint site. So that's the first place where we can run it. I'm going to look at that in a bit more detail in a moment, but I'm just going to show you where else we can run that report. So it may be that you want to run it against a SharePoint list or a SharePoint library, in which case you'll notice on the command bar, depending on how many buttons you've already got displayed on the command bar, you may have to click the ellipsis, but in there you will see the Discover Permissions as well. And that is running the permission report directly on the library or the list that you selected and nothing else. So nothing inside that site or inside that list or library. And you can always see the scope here where it says that it is running within inside the scope of the document library. So as we close that, if we wanted to be able to run that Discover Permissions report on folders or on files, we can go through and select those folders and files from inside the document library and then click the ellipsis on one of them, and you'll see Discover Permissions appearing on that drop down menu. And notice that this time we're actually seeing the folders multiple times. Now, a question that often comes up here is the fact that, of course, the folders contain subfolders and those subfolders contain subfolders. So shortly I'm going to get into the advanced Discover Permissions report to show you how we can actually just specify unique permissions inside the site, and that way we can get in deep into that folder structure to be able to see who's got permissions to each of those folders, whether they're a main top level folder or a subfolder as well. So before we do that, let's just go back into that Discover Permissions report and we'll fully explain the report here. So what we've got is a list of users. So that's a full list of all of the users that contain permissions to this particular site. If they do not have permissions, they're not going to appear in here. And of course, everybody in here does have some level of permission. So we can sort by username, either ascending or descending. So if there is a particular person you're looking for, of course, putting it into alphabetical order is useful to try and find that person. If you've got hundreds or thousands of users, you can also use the filter. And the filter contains the ability to just look at things like external users. So we can say, is external user, hit that checkbox to say yes, and when we hit save, we can see all of the external users in one place. And notice here that the external users always appear in italics, and as you hover over a person card, you'll be able to see who that person is in terms of their email address and how they accessed your tenant. So I'm going to clear that filter and just show you that also we could go through and filter based on something like the user display name. So maybe if I just know partially the person's name, what I could do is just say it's like, and in here I'm just going to put Brett. Don't need to really have the Brett on it, it's going to type a header anyway for me. But yeah, I can go through and choose that, and it's returning any Bretts with inside this permissions report as well. So that's how we can go through and perform a filter on the username, and we can do the same thing on the permission levels as well. So in here we've got of course the ability to sort again by permission level, but we can also filter by permission level too. So I might not be interested in something such as the full control implicit, and just to explain that one, the implicit means that they've been granted permissions indirectly by being a site collection administrator or something along those lines. So they're not actually given permissions explicitly to the site, but they're implicitly because they are a site collection admin. So we could exclude that, but we can also add further conditions or filter groups into this as well. So what I could do is add another condition, and this can become an and or an or. So I'm going to specify that this is an or, and we'll say so not equal to full control implicit or full control. So as I save that, it's going to return everything bar the users with full control. Okay, and we can also filter on the permission via. So you'll notice inside the permission via column that we've got users that are granted permissions through Microsoft 365 groups, and there may also be users that are permissioned through Active Directory security groups as well. So using the permission via, we can again sort, we can also filter, and this shows the permission via name, permission via email, or permission via display name. So what we could do is simply select from that something like the Sales Active Directory Security Group, and as I do choose that and hit save, all of these people are going to be members of that particular group. Okay, so that's how we can use the Discover permissions on a particular site, and of course it's going to be the same for any list or library or also folder or item. And from here we can also go through and export the report. So as we export it, notice that we get the file, and we can open that up, and it's exporting what I had displayed. So in here we could go through and highlight that as well. We can format it as a table. We can tell it that our table contains headers, and once we've done that, we could of course resize the columns, and now we can also filter on users in here as well. So if I wanted to filter by username, we could do, or if we wanted to filter by the internal or external users and so on, we can do that too. So that's how we can go through and export the report, so that way it takes a snapshot. Another thing you could do is also to save that report as a template. So if it's something that you wanted to come back to regularly, we can simply choose the Save as Template here. We can provide it a name, so I could call it My Permission Report. It helps if maybe provide the site name as well, and we could also make it shared, so any other site owners could also access the report as well. So once I save that, as we come down to report templates, this is where it's going to be saved. So you can see My Permission Report right at the very top. We can generate it, and it produces the report for me. And what we can also do is go through and amend it. So in here, if we decided that we wanted to include some other things inside of our reports, such as the lists and libraries with unique permissions, or the folders and items with unique permissions, we could do that. And as I hit save here and generate that report, notice that we're getting into a bit more detail now. We're not just seeing who's got permissions to my site inside that Discover Permissions report, but we're also seeing who's got access to any lists with unique permissions and any items with unique permissions as well. So that's something that you could run whenever you want, just by clicking on that report name without having to actually go through and select any scopes. So that effectively was a advanced Discover Permissions report, and you can go into the advanced Discover Permissions report also from the DeliverPoint menu here. So when we go to that DeliverPoint menu from the reports, notice there is the advanced Discover Permissions report here as well at the very top, and again we could choose those same options from there to include anything with unique permissions inside of our site. The last three options here are including things that inherit permissions, and to be honest, in most environments that's going to be quite an overwhelming report because it's reporting on literally every single file and folder within inside the site. So we could pre-filter it as well using the same filters as we saw before, or just hit generate, and that will generate the advanced Discover Permissions report for me. And if you did have those folders that are buried deep, this report will get to those folders as well. Okay, so hopefully you found this useful on using the Discover Permissions report contextually from within inside a SharePoint site. Just to point out that you could also do the same thing in Teams as well. So if you do have teams that you manage, you can of course access Teams. So we'll go into Teams here, and if you've added DeliverPoint to your Teams environment, then you'll see it on the left hand side as a personal app here. If you haven't added it and it is available to you, you'll be able to add it through the ellipsis, so we can browse for more apps through that Find an App feature. But as we click onto the DeliverPoint app here, you'll notice that we can use those same Discover Permissions reports against different teams inside of our environment too. So once this has loaded the teams, we can do a search for the team that we want to report against. So there's the Lightning Tools sales, and I could discover the permissions at that level as well. Okay, so I hope you found this useful. If there's any questions, of course, please feel free to reach out to support@lightningtools.com. Many thanks.